My towel eventually slipped, landing softly on the floor. "Maria," he murmured, his voice tinged with admiration as his gaze lingered on me. His fingers traced the contours of my body, his touch gentle, almost reverent, as if he was etching every detail into memory. This is how it all began. I'd love to invite you to subscribe to our channel and like our videos. Each click from you means a lot to us. Your support motivates us to continue sharing more meaningful stories. If you enjoy our content, we encourage you to share, leave a comment, and ask any questions below. Every interaction helps build a stronger, more engaged community. I hope you'll stay with us until the end of the video. I truly appreciate you being here. My name is Maria, and though it may sound self-indulgent, beauty has always been my companion. Even at 65, my well-proportioned figure, smooth skin, and radiant smile still turn heads. My thick gray hair cascades past my shoulders in soft waves, and my warm, honey-brown eyes seem to hold secrets that draw people in. Despite leading a quiet life, distancing myself from romance since my husband's passing, I still feel the weight of lingering glances and hushed whispers wherever I go. But none of that matters to me anymore. My life is steady, predictable, and I've grown accustomed to it. I've chosen to avoid love, not because opportunities haven't come my way. Men of various ages, from silver-haired gentlemen looking for companionship to younger men barely past their youth, have attempted to sway me. I always turn them down, telling myself I'm too old for romantic entanglements. Deep inside, though, I know the truth runs deeper than that. I've sealed my heart away. I've known loss, and the idea of reopening that door terrifies me. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, my phone rang. It was Greg, my nephew. Greg is my older sister's only son, a man in his mid-30s, brimming with energy and mischief. His tall, athletic build and self-assured swagger naturally turn heads, particularly among women. My sister, Lucy, has often called me, exasperated by his flirtatious ways. "Maria," she would sigh, "this boy is going to be the death of me one day. He just won't stop chasing women." I would always laugh it off, assuring her it was just a phase. Young men his age often behave this way, but deep down, I knew Greg was different. There was something about him, an effortless charm, an undeniable magnetism that made women fall for him, even when they knew they shouldn't. "Hey, Aunt Maria." Greg's cheerful voice rang through the phone. "Hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." "Not at all," I assured him. "What's up?" "I was wondering if I could stay at your place for the weekend. I just need a little break from everything," he said, his tone carrying a hint of hesitation. I hesitated for a moment, taken aback. Greg rarely reached out for favors like this. He was always busy. His social life and career kept him on the move. So for him to ask for a place to stay without a clear reason was unusual. My home, a peaceful retreat far from the city's chaos, was a quiet sanctuary. It was the complete opposite of the lively, fast-paced world he thrived in. But something in his voice gave me pause. This wasn't just a casual visit. There was an underlying need in his words. After a brief moment, I responded, feeling both concern and warmth. Of course, Greg, I said gently. You're always welcome. This is your home, too. Thanks, Aunt Maria, he replied, his voice lighter. I'll be there by Friday evening. As I hung up, curiosity settled over me. What was he trying to escape? Was it a woman, a broken relationship, a falling out with his mother? Greg had always been a puzzle, full of hidden layers. No matter how well I knew him, he still managed to surprise me. I couldn't help but wonder what had led him here, and what would this weekend reveal? As Friday neared, time seemed to slip away, and soon enough, the evening arrived. Sitting in the living room, I heard the familiar hum of a car pulling into my driveway. I stood up, anticipation mingling with slight apprehension. When I opened the door, there he was, Greg, looking familiar, yet subtly different, dressed in dark jeans and a snug black t-shirt that highlighted his athletic frame. He carried his usual effortless charm. His warm, bright smile hadn't changed, but his eyes told a different story. A hint of unease, a restlessness that didn't quite fit his usual confident demeanor. Aunt Maria, he greeted warmly, pulling me into a tight hug. You look as amazing as ever. I chuckled at his charm, a trait he never seemed to outgrow. And you're as smooth-talking as ever, I teased, laughing. Come on in, let's get you settled. As Greg stepped inside, his eyes swept over the familiar space. The cozy living room, bathed in soft, golden light, welcomed him. The comforting scent of freshly baked bread lingered in the air, adding to the warmth. My home had always been a place of solace, a space where one could breathe a little easier. Yet, tonight, as Greg took in his surroundings, I sensed he was searching for something, trying to find his footing in a moment of quiet turmoil. What had truly brought him here? And what was he hoping to find? He exhaled deeply as he settled onto the couch, as if shedding a heavy burden, even if only for a moment. Wow, he murmured, stretching out. I really missed this place. I chuckled. You act like it's been years since you were last here. He leaned back, closing his eyes for a brief moment before responding, well, it feels like it. Life's been moving so fast, I haven't had a second to breathe. Here is your fully paraphrased version. I arched an eyebrow. My curiosity piqued, but remained silent, hoping he would elaborate. Instead, he simply shook his head with a faint smile, as though he wasn't quite ready to share more. As the evening progressed, we made our way outside to the garden, where a soft breeze wove through the trees, carrying the delicate fragrance of blossoming flowers. The tranquil setting seemed to encourage him to open up. We sat together in a peaceful silence, the gentle sounds of crickets and rustling leaves filling the air like a soothing melody. Eventually, Greg broke the quiet. You know, Aunt Maria, he began, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. Sometimes it feels like I'm trapped in a cycle that never ends. The parties, the women, it's exciting at first, but after a while, it just becomes exhausting. His words caught me off guard. This wasn't the confident, carefree Greg I had always known. The young man who usually carried himself with effortless charm was now exposing a vulnerable side I had never seen before. A wave of concern washed over me as I realized how much he had been carrying on his shoulders. I considered his words for a moment before responding gently. Maybe it's time for a change, Greg. He exhaled, his gaze drifting toward the garden. Maybe, he murmured, but it's not that easy. People have these expectations of me. It's like I can't deviate from the path they've set for me without letting them down. Moving closer, I rested a reassuring hand on his. Greg, I said, my voice steady, yet filled with warmth. You don't have to live according to what others expect of you. You're still young. You have time to figure out what you truly want, to live life on your own terms. For a long moment, he just looked at me, his eyes searching mine with an intensity I hadn't anticipated. There was something unspoken in his gaze, something that made my heart skip a beat. It unsettled me, though I couldn't quite understand why. The weekend passed in a blur of quiet moments and conversations that seemed to stretch endlessly. At first, Greg remained somewhat reserved, but as the days unfolded, he relaxed more, and I, too, found myself growing increasingly comfortable in his presence. It was a pleasant surprise, one I hadn't expected. Still, there were fleeting moments, subtle yet undeniable, when I would catch him watching me in a way that stirred something deep inside. It was never blatant, never overt, just an occasional lingering glance or a soft, almost knowing smile that felt different, as if more was being conveyed in that silent exchange than words ever could. Greg's visit turned out to be unexpectedly comforting in a way I hadn't foreseen. He breathed life into my quiet home, filling the once still rooms with laughter and energy. He had a way of teasing me playfully, almost boyishly, making me feel lighter, as though, for a brief time, the weight of the years had lifted. There was something contagious about his presence. It made my home feel alive in a way I hadn't experienced in what felt like forever. One afternoon, as we stood in the kitchen preparing vegetables for dinner, I found myself smiling at how effortlessly he brought joy to even the simplest of tasks. His hands moved with practiced ease, but every so often he would pause, snatch a piece of cucumber, and pop it into his mouth with a mischievous grin that made me chuckle. I glanced at him and teased, "You're spoiling me," my tone playful yet sincere. He shot me a wink, his expression warm. "You deserve it, Aunt Maria," he said with affection. "You're always doing so much for others. It's about time someone took care of you for a change." His words settled deep within me, warming me in a way I hadn't expected. It had been so long since anyone had made me feel truly cared for. And Greg did it so naturally, without effort or pretense. Whether it was brewing the perfect cup of tea in the morning or fixing small things around the house that I had long since ignored, his quiet gestures spoke louder than words. For the first time in years, I realized how much I had missed that kind of attention. But it wasn't just Greg's kindness that affected me. It was his playful nature, his ability to bring lightness into moments that would otherwise pass unnoticed. He had a knack for sneaking up on me without warning, wrapping his arms around me in a sudden embrace, or pressing a quick kiss to my cheek or the back of my neck. Each time I would gasp in surprise, only to hear his voice, teasing yet affectionate. "Aunt Maria, you're always so serious. You need to loosen up a little." I couldn't help but laugh at his antics, playfully swatting him away. Yet, even as I did, I couldn't shake the warmth that lingered long after his touch had left me. His gestures, light and fleeting, stayed in my thoughts, occupying my mind in ways I couldn't quite explain. One evening I sat curled up on the couch, engrossed in a book, when Greg suddenly flopped down beside me in his usual relaxed manner. Without hesitation, he draped an arm casually over my shoulders, leaning in to glance at the pages. I was so immersed in the story that his sudden proximity caught me off guard, making me hyper-aware of his presence. The warmth of his body so close to mine was almost dizzying. "Is it a love story?" he asked, his voice low and teasing, yet tinged with genuine curiosity. "It's none of your business," I shot back quickly, my cheeks flushing with embarrassment as I felt his gaze linger on me. Greg chuckled at my reaction, his deep laugh sending a shiver down my spine. He shifted slightly, his fingers brushing lightly against my arm as he adjusted his position. The brief contact sent a jolt through me, and I abruptly stood up, pretending to adjust the curtains to mask my sudden unease. "You're too restless," I muttered, aiming for irritation, though my heart pounded in my chest. Greg's grin widened, playful and knowing. "You love it," he countered, his voice dripping with mischief. I didn't reply. Instead, I turned away, but I couldn't ignore the way he had unsettled me. As the days passed, Greg's presence left an undeniable mark on me. His teasing touches, the way his eyes lingered, the unspoken intimacy in his gestures, so casual, yet so intimate, began to affect me in ways I couldn't control. It wasn't just his words or actions, it was the way he made me feel. Alive, awake in a way I hadn't realized I was missing. I found myself anticipating his hugs, his playful remarks, the way his mere closeness sent a thrill through me. It was becoming harder to deny. Late one night, the house was unusually quiet. The only sounds, the steady hum of the ceiling fan above and the occasional chirp of crickets outside. I was alone in the kitchen, stacking the dishes back into place, when the sound of footsteps behind me caught my attention. Turning around, I saw Greg enter, his broad chest and strong arms uncovered, the dim overhead light casting gentle shadows across his skin. His effortless confidence and unguarded demeanor made my pulse quicken, though I couldn't quite explain why. "Can't sleep?" he asked, his voice softer than usual, as if he were trying to breach the invisible wall I had put up. "Not really," I answered, briefly glancing at him before quickly averting my eyes, feeling the weight of his gaze. He stepped forward unhurriedly, closing the space between us, and leaned against the counter. His stance relaxed, yet his eyes searching mine, waiting for me to meet him halfway. "You've been quiet today," he noted, his tone laced with concern. "Is something wrong?" I nodded, but the tightness in my chest betrayed me. A tension hung between us, thick and almost tangible, wrapping around us like an invisible force. His eyes, magnetic in their intensity, held me captive. For a long moment, neither of us spoke, the silence stretching between us, heavy with something unspoken. Finally, he broke it. His voice was barely a whisper, hanging in the air like an unspoken confession. "You know, Aunt Maria," he murmured, his words lingering, "you're the most beautiful woman I've ever known." My breath hitched, and I froze. His words struck a chord I wasn't prepared for, sending a shiver through me, an electric pulse that left me unsteady. My heartbeat thundered, each beat too loud in the stillness surrounding us. "Greg, don't say things like that," I managed to whisper, my voice barely audible. My eyes refused to meet his, afraid of what I might find in them. "Why not?" he questioned, his voice unwavering but carrying an edge of vulnerability that made it hard to push him away. "It's the truth." He took another step closer, his hand lifting slowly, almost as if waiting for me to stop him. But I didn't. His fingers brushed a stray lock of hair from my face, and though the touch was light, it sent a tremor through me, stealing the breath from my lungs. That fleeting contact set off a chain reaction inside me, a pull I couldn't ignore. "Greg, this isn't—" I began, but he cut me off before I could finish. "This isn't what?" His voice had dropped to a hushed murmur, but there was a certainty in it that sent my mind spinning. My pulse pounded, my thoughts tangled in a chaotic swirl of emotions. I opened my mouth to protest, to put an end to whatever this was before it crossed a line. But no words came. Instead, I stood there, frozen, as his hand settled on my waist. The warmth of his touch seeped through my clothes, pulling me closer, closer than I had ever imagined. His arms, strong and unwavering, enveloped me, his body radiating heat, igniting something deep within me, something I had long tried to bury. The space between us vanished, leaving only the erratic beat of my heart and the undeniable pressure of his body against mine. "Greg, we can't," I whispered, my voice trembling. But even as I spoke, I didn't pull away. I remained pressed against him, betraying everything I had told myself. His lips grazed my cheek, so near to my mouth that I could feel the warmth of his breath against my skin. The delicate brush of contact made my breath catch, and for an instant, time seemed to halt. Everything around us faded, leaving only this moment, stretched to the point of unbearable tension, thick with desires neither of us voiced. I didn't know how long we remained like that, motionless, silent, yet saying so much in the space between us. Words were unnecessary. They hung in the air, unspoken but deeply felt. At last, I pulled away, my chest rising and falling in uneven breaths, my pulse roaring in my ears. "Good night, Greg," I murmured, my voice barely steady, quivering with emotions I couldn't name. He didn't try to stop me as I turned and walked away, but I could feel his gaze lingering, heavy and unwavering, following my every step. It was as though he was waiting for me to turn around, to change my mind. But I didn't. I couldn't. Not yet. That night, I lay awake, my thoughts racing, replaying the moment again and again. What had I done? What was happening between us? I tried to convince myself it was nothing, just a fleeting moment, something that would fade with time. But deep down, I knew better. Something had shifted. There was no ignoring it now. I didn't want to admit it, but the truth was becoming impossible to deny. I craved Greg's presence in a way I never had before. His touch, his nearness, the way he looked at me, it made me feel something I hadn't felt in years. Something I didn't think I would ever feel again. I kept telling myself to push the thoughts away, but they always returned, each time stronger, more insistent. It felt like a dangerous game, one I knew I shouldn't play. But even as I tried to convince myself to put an end to it before it went too far, another part of me, an undeniable part, couldn't help but wonder, what if I didn't? What if I allowed it to unfold? What if I gave in to this pull I felt? The next morning, Greg was as carefree and playful as ever, acting as though nothing had changed, as if the night before had never happened. But when our eyes met, an unspoken understanding passed between us, a spark that neither of us could deny. It was subtle, but it was there, simmering just beneath the surface, a silent acknowledgement of what we had shared. As the days passed, the tension between us grew, slow and steady, like embers smoldering beneath the surface, impossible to extinguish. Greg's touches became more deliberate, his words bolder, laced with a teasing edge that sent my heart racing. Despite my best efforts to resist, I found myself drawn to him, to the way he made me feel, to the things he awakened in me that I had long buried. It was overwhelming, dangerous even, but no matter how much I tried to fight it, I couldn't shake the thought lingering in the back of my mind. What would happen if I stopped fighting it? It felt as though something was steadily growing between us, something I couldn't push away, no matter how much I tried. I knew deep down that it was only a matter of time before everything reached its breaking point. The afternoon air was stifling, and I decided a cool shower would be the perfect escape. My room was tranquil, the only sound the distant hum of the outside world. Sunlight filtered through the window, painting delicate patterns on the walls, creating an almost dreamlike serenity. I had just slipped out of my clothes, letting the fabric pool at my feet before wrapping myself in a plush white towel. Its softness was comforting against my skin, the coolness a welcome relief. My hair was loosely gathered at the back of my head, a few wisps falling around my face, adding to the effortless calm of the moment. I was about to head toward the bathroom when I realized I'd left my phone on the coffee table in the living room. It didn't seem urgent. The phone had been ringing constantly, but nothing had suggested it was anything pressing. It could wait a few minutes, but just as my fingers brushed the doorknob, I heard the quiet but deliberate sound of footsteps outside my door. The steps halted right outside, followed by a hesitant knock. "Aunt Maria?" Greg's voice came through the door. Before I could gather my thoughts to respond, the door creaked open, and there he was, standing in the doorway with my phone in his hand. Our eyes met, and for an instant, he seemed caught off guard. "Your phone's been—" His words faltered as his gaze drifted down to me. I stood there, wrapped in nothing but the towel, my skin still damp from the lingering steam of the shower. The moisture clung to me, making my bare shoulders glisten faintly in the dim light. I watched as realization dawned on his face, his eyes widening slightly in surprise. He froze for a brief moment, his lips parting as though to finish his sentence. But no words came. My heartbeat quickened, the space between us suddenly feeling too small, the air heavy with unspoken tension. "Greg," I murmured, my voice barely audible. But it was enough. My throat tightened, and I found myself at a loss for words. Before I could fully register what was happening, Greg moved, his steps purposeful, controlled. In a heartbeat, he was right in front of me, his strong hands reaching up to cradle my face with a gentleness that belied the intensity in his eyes. His fingers traced along my jawline as his gaze bore into mine, flickering with something deep, something unreadable. A shiver ran through me, as if he was searching for something within me, something undeniable. "Aunt Maria, I can't hold back anymore," he whispered, his voice raw, thick with emotion. Then, before I could respond, he kissed me. The sensation was unlike anything I had expected, electric, consuming, a force that left me breathless. His lips were soft, yet insistent, moving against mine with a fierce tenderness that unraveled me. For a moment, I was paralyzed, stunned, unable to process what was happening. My mind struggled to catch up with the rapid beats of my heart, but as his hand slid around my waist, pulling me closer, something long, buried deep within me stirred. An ache, a longing I hadn't acknowledged until now. "Greg," I managed to say, breaking the kiss just enough to speak. But he didn't let me finish. His lips found mine again, silencing my protest with a passion that left me trembling. This time the kiss was deeper, more urgent. The moment pressed in on us, the tension thick and unrelenting. My towel loosened slightly, the fabric slipping under the weight of our closeness. Instinctively, I clutched it tighter, but Greg's hands were already there, firm, steady, holding me as though I were something precious, something irreplaceable. "I've wanted to do this for so long," he admitted, his voice hoarse with longing. His words washed over me like a tide, sending a shiver through my body. I barely had time to think before instinct took over. Without hesitation, my arms wrapped around his neck, pulling him closer, our bodies pressed together, fitting as if they were always meant to. I kissed him back, the intensity of it catching me off guard. It felt as though this moment had been years in the making, inevitable and unstoppable. The afternoon sun, once warm and gentle, now burned hotter, its golden rays intensifying as we lost ourselves in each other. Time stretched, the world beyond us fading, until nothing remained but the two of us, entwined in this reckless, stolen moment. Eventually, my towel gave way entirely, slipping from my body and pooling at my feet, forgotten in the heat of our closeness. "Maria," Greg murmured, his voice thick with awe. His gaze locked onto mine, filled with an intensity that left me breathless. His fingertips traced over my skin, as if committing every curve, every inch of me to memory. Each touch was deliberate, reverent. A part of me knew what we were doing was dangerous, forbidden. A warning echoed in the back of my mind, urging me to stop, to step away before we crossed a line we could never undo. But in that moment, reason melted into nothingness. All I could feel was the raw, overwhelming sensation of being alive. Alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. Cherished and wanted in a way I hadn't allowed myself to be. Greg held me like something sacred, his hands warm and steady as they slid along my back, tracing my form with such tenderness that I shivered. My body responded to him in ways I never anticipated. His lips brushed against my neck, lingering, igniting a heat that spread through me in waves. "Maria," he whispered, his breath warm against my ear, sending a fresh surge of desire through me. The way he said my name made my heart stutter, a blush creeping across my cheeks. When I looked up at him, his gaze was locked onto mine, intense, unwavering, filled with an emotion so fierce it stole my breath. Slowly, he leaned in again, his lips capturing mine in a kiss that spoke of unspoken promises, of passion and longing neither of us could deny. As the kiss deepened, Greg's hands roamed over my shoulders, down my arms, and found their way to my waist. His touch was gentle yet sure, pulling me closer, enveloping me in his embrace as if he never wanted to let go. The warmth of his body pressed close to mine, his heartbeat steady and strong, resonating within me as a constant reminder that we were here together in this moment. "Greg," I murmured, my voice barely above a whisper, shaking under the weight of the emotions coursing through me. But before I could say anything more, he silenced me with another kiss, deeper this time, as though he couldn't get enough. His lips moved against mine with a confidence that left me breathless, each touch more urgent than the last. One of his hands cradled my face, his thumb tracing gentle circles on my skin, while his gaze locked onto mine, filled with an intensity that was both tender and overwhelming. I've imagined this for so long, he admitted, his voice hushed, thick with emotion. Holding you, being near you, you have no idea how much you mean to me. His raw honesty sent a deep ache through me, unlocking emotions I hadn't realized I had been suppressing. My fingers, trembling slightly, reached up to trace the shape of his jaw, marveling at the solidity of him, how real he felt, as though he could fill the void I hadn't known existed. I never thought I could feel this way again, I confessed, my voice unsteady, the sheer vulnerability of my words tightening my chest. You should feel this way, Greg said with certainty, his voice unwavering. You deserve to be cherished, to be wanted, to be loved. His words surrounded me like a vow, and in that instant I understood. I was ready to let go of everything that had kept me from this. The moment felt dreamlike, as if we were suspended in time, the only two people who mattered in the entire universe. Golden afternoon sunlight streamed through the window, casting a soft glow over the room, intensifying the magic between us. Are you okay? He asked gently, his voice laced with concern as his eyes searched mine for any sign of hesitation. He seemed to be waiting, as though he could feel the intensity of the emotions swirling inside me. I'm not sure, I admitted, my voice quiet but honest. But I don't regret it, not at all. A soft smile spread across Greg's face, his hand brushing a loose strand of hair from my forehead, the gesture both familiar and comforting. Neither do I, he said simply, his words carrying an unspoken promise. For a while we lay there together, the outside world forgotten, wrapped in the warmth of the connection we had just deepened. In the silence, there was a comfort, a rare certainty that for once, nothing beyond this moment mattered. But as time passed and the golden light of the afternoon began to fade, reality began creeping back in. The significance of what had just happened settled over me, unraveling the peaceful haze that had surrounded us. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I found myself in the garden, the cool night breeze brushing against my skin, carrying the scent of blooming flowers. Sitting on the edge of a stone bench, I stared into the twilight, my mind racing to make sense of it all. What did this mean for us? Had we crossed an irreversible boundary? Could we pretend nothing had changed? Or had we altered something fundamental between us? The uncertainty gnawed at me, its weight pressing heavily on my chest. I was lost in thought when Greg approached, his presence grounding me amidst the storm of emotions I had been struggling with all afternoon. He had a way of calming my mind, yet at the same time, his nearness made it impossible to suppress the feelings I had tried so hard to ignore. Aunt Maria, he began, his voice low but steady, carrying both gentleness and determination. I know this isn't simple, but I don't regret a single moment of today. More than anything, I don't want this to end here. Not like this. I turned to him, my heart heavy with a tangle of emotions. Confusion desire, guilt, and something else just as powerful. His words, though spoken calmly, sent a ripple of unease through me. Greg, this isn't just complicated, it's wrong. The words left my lips before I could stop them. He met my gaze, unwavering, his eyes burning with a determination that made my breath hitch. Why? He challenged. Because of what people might say? Because of the age difference? I hesitated, struggling to steady my breath. The truth was, it wasn't about what others thought or the years between us. It wasn't about any of the things I should have been worried about. No, I whispered, none of that matters to me. What matters is how I feel about you. That's what makes this so hard. His words struck something deep within me, something I couldn't quite name. He was being honest, completely, unflinchingly real, and I saw it in his eyes. A part of me wanted to trust him, to follow him down whatever uncertain, terrifying path this was leading us toward. But fear held me back. Fear of judgment, fear of what I was risking, fear of losing control. Days passed, yet the tension between us refused to fade. If anything, it intensified, lingering in every space we shared. Greg, ever patient, gave me room to think, but made sure I never forgot where he stood. He didn't push, but he didn't retreat either. And despite my best efforts to put distance between us, to suppress the emotions that churned inside me, I couldn't escape the pull I felt whenever he was near. That moment, the heat of the afternoon, the weight of his touch, had changed something. I felt it in my bones, in the way the air hummed whenever he was close. I just didn't know if I had the strength to face it, to surrender to it, or if my fears would win, driving us apart forever. That evening, the air between us felt thick with words left unspoken, so heavy that I could focus on nothing else. I sat on the couch, attempting to distract myself with the television, but my thoughts kept drifting back to him, to us. I didn't hear him come in, yet somehow I sensed his presence even before his voice broke the silence. Aunt Maria, he murmured, his tone carrying both hesitation and resolve. Looking up, I saw him standing there, his expression open and vulnerable, but also filled with quiet strength. His gaze locked onto mine, searching, perhaps for reassurance, perhaps for understanding. Without another word, he moved closer, sitting beside me, and in an instant, the space between us vanished. His warmth radiated through me, the nearness of him sending a wave of heat across my skin. I can't keep pretending, Greg admitted, his voice steady yet low. I don't want to act like nothing happened when you're all I can think about. His words lingered in the air, their weight settling heavily on my chest. He held my gaze, waiting, expecting me to say something, anything, but I could only stare, overwhelmed by emotions I hadn't yet figured out. Greg, this isn't easy for me, I finally managed, my voice unsteady. I've spent my life being careful, being cautious, and now everything feels so different, so overwhelming. He offered me a small, understanding smile. Maybe it's time for a change, he suggested gently, his tone calm and reassuring. He reached for my hand, his fingers enclosing mine with a steady warmth that felt like an anchor. His touch grounded me in a way I hadn't expected. I looked at him then, truly looked, beyond the charming young man I'd known for so long, and saw someone who genuinely cared. Not just as a relative, not just as his aunt, but as a woman. He saw me for who I was and who I could still become. Something inside me shifted at that moment, like a silent wave rolling through me, altering everything in its path. Before I had the chance to second guess myself, I leaned toward him, drawn by a force I couldn't resist, closing the small gap between us. My lips met his in a kiss that started soft and uncertain, but quickly deepened as the world around us faded. His hands moved to cup my face, his thumbs caressing my cheeks, sending a shiver down my spine. That kiss was more than just a physical connection. It carried every unspoken emotion between us, a silent understanding we both shared. He kissed me as if I were the only thing that mattered in that moment, the only person he saw. When we finally parted, breathless and wide-eyed, I saw the same intensity reflected in his gaze. It made my pulse race, sending an exhilarating thrill through me. From that moment on, nothing was the same. There was no going back, no pretending that nothing had changed. Greg and I stole moments together, quiet, private seconds where time seemed to pause. Whether we were side by side in the kitchen, laughter filling the air, strolling through the garden in peaceful silence, or simply sitting together on the couch, the outside world ceased to exist. Each shared moment felt like a rare, precious gift. Greg was always thoughtful, constantly finding ways, big and small, to show me how much I meant to him. He would bring me flowers picked fresh from the garden, their vibrant hues a stark contrast to the stillness of our lives. He left handwritten notes for me to find on the kitchen counter, tucked between the pages of my book, each one appearing just when I needed it most. And whenever we were alone, his hand always reached for mine, his fingers lacing through mine like he was holding onto something he never wanted to release. One evening, as we sat beneath the vast expanse of a star-filled sky, Greg turned to me, his expression serious and contemplative. The night air carried a chill, but his presence beside me was enough to keep me warm. "I need you to know something," he said, his voice steady, laced with raw, unwavering emotion. "I'm not going anywhere. No matter what happens, no matter what challenges come our way, I'm here, with you." Tears welled in my eyes, his words sinking deep into my heart. I reached for his hand, gripping it tightly. "Greg, you've brought so much light into my life. I can't imagine what I'd do without you," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. His soft smile was both reassuring and heart-wrenching. "You'll never have to find out," he replied, pulling me into his arms. And in that moment, wrapped in his embrace, I knew, without hesitation, that we were in this together, no matter what the future held. Our love became something deeply personal, a secret we protected, a bond that only strengthened with time. We understood that the world around us might never fully grasp the depth of what we shared, but that didn't matter. What mattered was the solace we found in each other, the unspoken comfort of every quiet moment we spent together. Our hearts, once weighed down by life's burdens, felt lighter in each other's presence. Greg reignited a spark in me that I had long believed extinguished. He brought me back to life. For the first time in years, I let myself hope again, dared to believe in the possibility of happiness. In his arms, I discovered a love that was both gentle and fierce, something undeniably real and uniquely ours. A love that had its own rhythm, its own pulse, one we held onto tightly, protecting it from the world.